Is ChatGPT going to take over real estate? Heck, is it going to replace us in real estate? I don't think so. But let's talk about it. I asked ChatGPT, what is ChatGPT? And here's
what did ChatGPT say it is?
ChatGPT
does it have an identity crisis?
Right? Like, yeah, I don't know. Actually, the funny thing is when I asked ChatGPT, what is ChatGPT? It took a really long time to answer. Like, it really had to think about, what am I? Who am I? No, just kidding, guys. Jordan, you recently were training and talking about this with folks. How did you describe what ChatGPT is to people?
Actually, so the analogy that I came up with that made the most sense to me was, when you're texting someone and the predictive text shows up and it suggests words for you, that is what ChatGPT does, just on a billion times more complicated level or complex level. It has been trained on billions of text samples, like news articles, blogs, books, just everything that you can think of up until September of 2021. And so it has really learned the patterns of how people communicate. And so that's what it's doing. It's predicting the next most likely thing to come up with after your prompt.
I think, I like to think of it as kind of a Siri or an Alexa, sort of, although it can't do stuff for you necessarily. Like, with Alexa or Siri, I can say, hey, send a text to so-and-so. ChatGPT can't do that, but there's a lot of things that it can do. And I think this is where it gets interesting. Like, why is it such a big deal? Everyone's talking about it.
Actually takes me back in time to like 2010. When Apple came out with the iPad and everybody was like, oh my gosh, this new technology, can it replace me? And then all of a sudden there was another technology infusion when all of these tech companies come out and they say, hey, we're going to have all of these online searches for buyers and sellers to communicate and learn about what's going on in a house. And is that going to replace a real estate agent? I think it's really important for us to take a step back, get out of this panic stage and reflect on what is ChatGPT, what is actually fundamentally technology. And what it is it's a tool. It is fundamentally a tool that we can use or ignore.
Why do we use tools? Well, we might use a tool so we can do more faster. We might use a tool so we can have a higher quality output, right? There's a lot of reasons why we might use a tool. I think of, back in the olden days, people used a hammer and nails to build homes. And then they came along and they came out with like the pneumatic drill, whatever, where they just hit a button and the nail goes right in the wood. It's like a nail gun. That saves a carpenter a tremendous amount of time.
But did it replace that carpenter?
No, you still need to know what the heck you're doing with that thing, right?
You still have to have the knowledge. You still have to have the body. You still have to have the expertise to use the tool.
Now, the funny thing is, I still can't use a hammer, right? Like my thumbs are proof of that.
That's why you hire the expert.
So I think you're right on. Like, okay, if ChatGPT is not going to replace us in real estate, which it's not, what are some of the limitations that you've seen with ChatGPT as you've tried to put it to use?
Well, the first and most obvious is that it's trained on a data set that stopped in September of 2021. So it doesn't have access to current events. So you can't rely on it to do like current research or if you were to ask it, anything regarding your local market stats, it's not going to be able to pull that in for you. It also has a tendency to do this thing called hallucinating, which is where it will make up information that is neither correct nor factual to kind of fill in the gaps with its predictive text. So, for example, I was training our marketing club members yesterday on how to use ChatGPT to write listing descriptions. And I showed them an example of, I took a listing description from the MLS here in Austin. I just picked one because I'm on a couple searches, and it was for a condo. And I plugged it in there and I had ChatGPT rewrite it. And it was describing this condo as modern, but the condo was built in 1952.
Wait, so hold on. ChatGPT, this tool, made a mistake?
Yes.
Because it has not been in the condo, right?
Right. And I don't want to say too much because I think we're going to get to this point later, but I think that the personal experience aspect is something that it's never going to be able to replicate. So that's where a lot of people are shifting their focus, and where I think that real estate is going to start to need to shift its focus to really that personal experience and getting like expertise in your local market. But I won't say any more on that.
Well, it's funny. I did something kind of similar. I asked ChatGPT to write for me a report, like a real estate market update the other day. I said, write me a real estate market update email for Austin, Texas for last month. And it generated a response. But then I was like, that doesn't sound like the market that we're in. So I asked ChatGPT, how many homes sold last month in Austin? And it replied saying, I only have access to data up to September 2021. And so I don't know that information. So how, it produced an answer for a market report based on old, outdated data. It didn't tell you that. And here's the thing, if I didn't know better, like if I wasn't paying attention to the real estate market, I might have thought that was accurate, right? Because it was close enough, but I knew just from
it sounds
detail.
like someone wrote it because it is so good at mimicking human communication, but it doesn't, unless you tell it to care, it doesn't care about like the actual facts that are included.
Well, that's actually an interesting point. Like, it doesn't have emotion. It doesn't understand things like any kind of emotional context. It doesn't understand. I asked ChatGPT, how do you feel today? And it says, I am AI technology. I don't have feelings and desires and emotions and stuff like that. So I can't answer that question. I was like, oh, interesting. Very interesting.
There's a little tidbit story. So in my preparation for the training yesterday, I was using ChatGPT to figure out how to communicate with ChatGPT better. So I would give it like an example of a social media post that I wanted. And I would say, how do I ask you in such a way that you would produce this social media post? So I would tell it, I was trying to get it to tell me the prompts to use. And the prompts it always suggested back included like, please and thank you. And it was really polite to itself. And there have been other people using ChatGPT that have noticed that if you're polite to it, it pretends, or it like gives you better responses.
Interesting. So. I'm going to start dropping some curse words. Hey, ChatGPT, give me this, you sucker. Right? See what happens. Do I get all of a sudden ChatGPT starts hating on me because I communicate very poorly with it. Right?
Well, that also begs the question is like, what sort of memory are they storing with ChatGPT and you? So like with the history is like, do you really want to screw around with ChatGPT or any other AI? Because if they are storing that data as a memory point and they're like, hey, you know what? Don't deal with jerks. You might shoot yourself in the foot just testing that out.
Another interesting limitation that I was reading about ChatGPT is that it doesn't have access to the internet. It doesn't have access to your email or your files. And so that in one sense is a good thing, right, for our own security purposes. But on the flip side, it does limit what we could do with it. So I couldn't say to ChatGPT, hey, ChatGPT, email Jordan and send her an invite to a meeting. And I can't tell ChatGPT to send Gary this file that I'm working on. Like,
I wanted to say two things about that real quick, Chris, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
First, there is an API for ChatGPT, so you can connect it to other applications that can do functions for you. That's really complicated. We're not getting into that today. I just wanted to mention it. And secondly, about security. ChatGPT is not connected to the internet and it's not selling your data, but it is storing the conversations that you have with it. And ChatGPT is using those conversations to continue to train itself to work better. So definitely don't put any like sensitive information in ChatGPT or anything that you wouldn't want other people seeing because they might see it. It's not going to get published on the internet necessarily, but it's not secure.
You probably wouldn't want them to review your tax returns for you, right?
Exactly.
ChatGPT, tell me if I'm overpaying for my taxes this year.
How do I save money on my taxes? Here, let me just upload all that information.
Yeah.
Interesting. I was reading, I forget which one it is. There's all these new ChatGPT-like platforms that are available. I know Google has one called Bard. I was reading about another one this morning that I forget the name of it, but like the whole intent was around security and privacy and making sure that data wasn't going to get anywhere outside of the system. So I think that, it's a new field, but definitely ChatGPT, because ChatGPT is backed by, I think, Microsoft, right? And then Bard is backed by Google. So I'm sure there's going to be like a whole AI wars that are going to show up here in terms of the showdown of, what platform is going to dominate them all. But let's get into like, what are the things that we can actually do with ChatGPT?
I'd actually be most curious initially about the prompting, because that's where everything starts, right? Because if you don't ask the system the question in the right way, you're not going to extract what you need out of it. It's not like you just sit there and say, hey, tell me this. It's not going to be prompted correctly to extract the right information or the correct or most usable information. So how do we prompt? I've read a lot about this. How do we prompt the system to give us what we want?
Yes, definitely. So Chris already named it. It's called prompt engineering. It just means, fiddling around with the question you're asking ChatGPT until you get to a point where it produces the response that you want. So first, ChatGPT can get confused with complex or like nuanced language. So I find that like really direct instructions is what it responds to best. The best responses I've gotten from it have come when I have prompted it using bullet points. So for example, if I ask it to write me a social media post that has certain criteria or meets certain criteria, like I want it to mention the address of a listing and have 3 bullet points of highlight features about the home, I would ask it to do that. And then in bullet points, be like, this social media post must meet these requirements, and then list those out. And then that typically gets a good response from
So I'm hearing a lot of detail there, right?
Yes.
Okay.
The more detail you can provide it, the better the response it's going to have, because it's going to rely less on the predictive text and more on what you've given it. So it will take your words and the way that you're describing it and kind of shift those. And so it'll start talking more like you would yourself if you were to be writing it.
You know what? This reminds me of going to the library when I was at university, when we used the Dewey Decimal System, which most of you have no idea what I'm talking about.
Like that's with the cards in the big box that
Oh,
you
yeah,
go and
yeah,
pull them out
yeah.
with the little funny numbers on it.
Yeah. But at the same time, if you go up to the librarian and you said, I want a book about Russian spies, they'd say, okay, here's like 10,000 Russian spy novels here. But if I said, look, I'm looking for a Russian spy novel who that focused on an American spy who infiltrated Russia, and they extracted this information between the years of 1950 and 1955 that was written by an American, and it's written in English and was published by this publisher, all of a sudden they're like, I have that book for you. So it's like that's what it recalls for me is the more specific I can be about my request, which is also interesting, is that the more we extract from our customers in real estate,
the better we serve them.
The better we can serve them. So that's really interesting. How do we become the ChatGPT of real estate for our customers? That's probably for another episode.
Yeah, when you were talking, it made me think of like when you go to Google, for example, to run a search. I could search for homes for sale, and it'll give me a lot of responses. I could say homes for sale in Austin, Texas. It'll be less responses. I could say homes for sale in Austin, Texas with a pool under $1 million. The more criteria I give it, the more I'm going to get what I'm looking for. And it sounds very similar with ChatGPT is the more criteria that you give it, the more likely it's going to give you what you're looking for. And same thing, Gary, the more we communicate with our customers, the better we can serve them by understanding what it is that they're looking for.
Sure.
And so now, are there any, like when you go and enter these prompts into ChatGPT, you said you're using bullet points as to structure it. Does that seem, and you said that seems to work best instead of just sort of doing like a free flow of words, just try to organize it?
So I found that ChatGPT like responds best to short commands and then like a bullet point list of the criteria that you want. And another pro tip is to tell ChatGPT how to act. Like, you can tell it to pretend to be stuff. So pretend to be a email marketer, and then period, pretend to be an email marketer, period. You will produce an email marketing a webinar to our customers or something like that. And that gets it in the mind frame of what you're trying to produce. And then you give it the bullet point list of the criteria it's trying to hit. And that's usually the best response.
And then add a please and thank you at the
end. Definitely please and thank you. Another tip about prompt engineering is that you can edit your prompts. So if ChatGPT is giving you an answer that's just like not what you want, you could just keep typing to it and continue on the chat. The longer your chat gets, the more context ChatGPT has to get confused by. So, for example, I was trying to get it to do a social media post and a video script and a listing description all in one chat. And it was referencing different pieces than I was hoping it would. So I recommend editing your prompts if you're trying to just get more clarification on it. And you can also, there's a button that says regenerate response that will make ChatGPT give you multiple answers to the same question. And I find that I use that a lot to like Frankenstein the best pieces of the responses together. So it's more like I'm originally writing something, but just not from a blank slate.
So that's really interesting. It's like, so it seems to me, based on what you're saying, is that there is a balance between too little information and too much. Yes. And somewhere in the middle is going to be your sweet spot to generate what you want.
That makes sense, though. I mean, you think about that's what happens to people in real life. You know,
I was going to say, it's like communication with a man is like, don't give him too little, don't give him too much. You got to find that sweet spot.
Is that what Pamela's been telling you, Gary?
That's what I'm hearing here.
She's prompt engineering you really well these days.
The honey-do lists have gotten really direct.
Very clear.
But no please and thank you for Gary. You know, he doesn't need that.
Oh, no, I get the please and thank you because she knows how to get what she wants.
Let's talk about how we're using it. Like, what are the different ways to use it? For me, one of the ways that I have started using it is to get started on a lot of stuff. So let's say I'm going to write a social media post. Let's say I'm going to market a listing or something like that. I'll say, give me ideas for, and then insert whatever that might be.
Oh, that's really interesting because that gets you over that writer's block mentality, right?
Yeah. So I don't have to start with a blank slate. That's like the worst thing for me is looking at a blank piece of paper and saying, okay, how do I get started? And so ChatGPT, I've even done things like, okay, organize a market. Here's the thing. I can't just use what it shares, and I've never been able to just copy and paste. But I asked ChatGPT the other day, what's a good strategy for marketing an open house? And it came up with a response. I couldn't use it, but it got me started, right? Like, oh, okay, I can change this. I can do that. Ooh, I'm going to modify this. And so that was one of the ways that I've been using it, kind of in a real estate marketing context. Jordan, what are the other ways that you find us using this tool?
Well, the workflow I trained on yesterday was how to write a marketing narrative, which is like a more storytelling version of just a plain listing description, and then use that marketing narrative to write a social media post about a listing and write a video script, like a selfie style for social media video script, and a post caption for that video script. So that was our whole little workflow that we covered yesterday. I also came up with a workflow for turning video scripts into blog posts. So you would take a transcript of a video that you filmed, or if you use ChatGPT to write your video script, you could just say, this is the transcript of my video, and turn it into a blog post to upload to your site. You can use it to help write your bios for your like About Me page on your websites. We had someone who on the training yesterday who said that she used ChatGPT to help her write a relocation guide for her local area. Lots of cool uses.
Yeah, I find, what's interesting is that I think that ChatGPT and using it for like, let's say real estate marketing purposes, it's great for creating content.
Yes.
for content type marketing. But if you have to use persuasive marketing, or you're focused on getting like a result, for example, then I find that ChatGPT requires a lot of
Yeah.
additional expertise to get you the outcome that you want. For example, if I go and ask ChatGPT to write me a bunch of subject lines for an email, it will produce a bunch of subject lines. But which one's going to get the better open rate? Well, I know from experience which types will usually get the better open rate. Obviously, you have to split test it to confirm what it is. But through experience, I can say that one's good, that one's good. Ooh, that has urgency. Ooh, this is missing all of that. And so you can't just generate the response and swipe it if you're looking to get an actual marketing outcome.
Yeah, I mean, using it for factual stuff. I mean, another thing is like, one thing in the relocation guide, people are always looking for as they relocate is what is there to do. So, it's like act like you are the ambassador to Austin and write me the top 365 things to do in Austin. I like that. That's a cool use of that technology that I don't have to go and sit there hours and hours and hours of research. It just gives me the facts. But is that seductive? Like, is it seductive? Is it like really drawing that customer into a conversation with me? Probably not. It's just offering a little bit of value.
I don't think if you asked it to write a novel that it would write a Pulitzer Prize winning novel. You know what I mean? It'll probably be a novel that's hard to read. Interestingly enough, I was reading that ChatGPT passed the bar exams or something like that. Like it can memorize, or not memorize, but it can organize facts and communicate the facts really well. The problem is, once you get into where there's like skill or expertise or art necessary, like it's not going to write a book for you. It'll write a book.
I would love
Yes.
for ChatGPT to go back and take my SATs for me.
Me too. It's not very good at math though, and that's the part that I struggled with. So I probably wouldn't do so good.
Math is not my strong suit either. Okay, so what are some other ways, Gary? What are the different ways that you have thought of, like particularly in a real estate context? What are the different ways that we might be able to use it? We've talked about marketing listings. We've talked about creating our bios. We create about a lot of content marketing that we can use it for. Are there any other things that you can think of that in a real estate context that would make sense?
Yeah. So, when I look at this, I look at how can it save me time? Not how does it replace somebody else, not how does it replace me, but how does it condense the amount of time that it takes me to collate something or to start something. Like I was talking about is, the whole idea of how does it get me out of writer's block? Because I used to sit there and think about the narrative of how do I describe this property in a really great way as a listing description. And I would sit there and toil over it for hours. And for me to say, just act like you are a marketing machine or a marketing agency and describe this property that has, to Jordan's points, these bullet points, and to see what it kicks out. And like you said, Chris, not to copy and paste that, but to use that as a platform, as a benchmark to start from, to then create a much better description.
I remember talking to the agents at our old brokerage who held listings open, saying that they spent a lot of time reading through the feedback on their listings. Something that ChatGPT is really good at is providing summaries. So if you upload if you're collecting that data in a spreadsheet, you could copy and paste that into ChatGPT and say, give me a summary of this feedback. It would give you a nice little paragraph that you could send to your sellers.
Boy, I'll tell you, what a service to offer to your sellers is that as you get feedback from buyer's agents who come through the property, is to say, give me these bullet points, but also summarize and offer that to your seller. That's really valuable. It's not just valuable to them, but it's also valuable to you because it can prompt different conversations to say, oh, wow, this is a summary of what we are hearing. Let's have a conversation.
So building on that summary idea is, although it doesn't have access to the internet to get a current market report, if you have sources of it, multiple sources of information you can say, hey, can you summarize this and produce a market report for me? So for example, like the main sources I use for getting an understanding of what's happening on the national level is like Fannie Mae has some good resources. National Association of Realtors has some really good publications of information. Was it the MBA, the Mortgage Bankers Association? They all have really good, monthly reports that they generate on the national economy, right, and the national housing market. But you can grab those, copy and paste it in there, and say, synthesize this information into an email that a real estate agent would send to their customers describing the national housing market. So that could work, right? So you don't have to, now you'll still have to read it. You probably need to read most of those documents to make sure it's accurately reflecting, what's being said. But it's a huge time saver to be able to have, hey, just synthesize this feedback, synthesize these comments, synthesize these reports.
And they still require, like, they're hungry. They want this information. They want it distilled. They want it understood and broken down so that they don't have to do so much thinking. That's our job as real estate agents, is to gather the information, be those professionals, distill it down, and summarize and send it out. And so if we can use ChatGPT to help us summarize so we don't have to think so hard for so long, I think that helps.
That's a time saver. So, Jordan, if someone's new to ChatGPT, they haven't used it or they want to start using it, like, what are some of the first steps that you would suggest somebody take?
What's great about this tool is there's no learning curve on it, really. It's just a chatbot, right? Like you've sent a text message before, you can use ChatGPT. That's why I think it's made such waves since its release. It's so accessible, So if you are truly just don't know what's going on, just go type in a chat and see what it pops up with. And I'm certain that you will start to get the hang of it very soon. If you want to have a quick application to your real estate business, I would look at the problem that you are currently spending time on. Try and figure out what your current stopping point is and see what ChatGPT has to say about it.
Yeah, I was going to say, get in, go Google ChatGPT. You have to create an account to get started, and then just start playing with it. Just start going in there and playing with it. Have some fun. Be polite, just in case it's keeping track of stuff, right? And don't share any sensitive information in there. But I think, like most tools, the first step is just go play with it. Go figure it out. Go mess around with it and see what its capabilities are. And I think the thing is, there's nothing to be afraid of. You don't have to be afraid of it. Is lean into it and see how you might be able to use it. And I think that's, if we can view that, this tool, ChatGPT or any others, like, oh, well, how could I put this into the workflow? How do I put this into my daily practices as a real estate professional? I think it'll serve you guys well. And so if you found any of this information helpful, useful, do us a huge favor. We'd love it if you were to subscribe to our channel, like this video, comment in the section. We'll see you in the next episode. Take care.
Bye, everyone.